Hey, cutie. You wanna show the people what we got right now? I have done a lot of double rope splicing. Probably the rope that I've climbed on the most is kind of the Yale XTC 24 variety. Right here we have some Prism, but there's also Blue Moon's the most popular one, Arrow Frog, things like that. But this Prism is very beautiful. We just have some short samples here. And the splice that I've always done with that is a standard Samson Class 1 double braid splice. But I have some Tachyon here, and Tachyon is what I've been climbing on at work for a while. And if you look up the splicing instructions for that, they have their funny Splife program, which is a little bit different. They have the instructions for splicing Adrenaline, which is the only manufacturer instructions for splicing a kern mantle rope. Teufelberger's got two of them. They got the Adrenaline and then also the Fly, which is kind of a funny looking kern mantle rope. But the splice that they kind of advertise for Tachyon, even though if you buy Tachyon spliced online and stuff, unless it's like the Teufelberger manufacturer Splife, it's usually going to be just a regular Class 1 splice, because this is just a regular 24 strand with some extra stabilizing cores in the middle, these little purple guys, just to keep it rounder. The cool thing about the Splife that they advertise, alright, as long as you're not eating chunks of that tape, you can keep playing with that, is that they kind of do what I would consider like a core diminished splice. Because when you do a standard 24 strand splice, you leave the core whole until it's in the backberry taper, and you also leave the cover whole. So what that means is that at the throat of the splice, you have 2 times the rope diameter basically in the same one jacket area. Makes these splices pretty stout compared to any other splice. They're very thick at the splice area itself, and then are kind of in the eye, and it also means that it stays pretty thick at the throat of the splice and pretty stiff up into where the taper starts. So they are they are very stiff to handle. But the splice that Teufelberger instructs you to do is something that's a lot more pliable. I don't know if the one that they do is exactly zigzag passable, but it's a much thinner splice. So I'm going to do it in some Tachyon here, and then after a while I'm going to adapt their instructions to be able to do it on this Yale Prism, the standard XTC 24, to get kind of a diminished splice, and we'll break them to see how the numbers compare between them. These are just short lines. I don't plan to climb on either of these splices, even though I'm sure it would be totally safe to do so. We'll send in 2 samples of each, the 2 Tachyon samples, and I'll hopefully be able to get 2 out of both of these, and 2 Yale samples to see how the splice applies across the 2, which I think it'll do just fine. We just have to make our ratios the way that I do for adapting any splice to a slightly differently constructed rope. The differences here that are pretty important is when I'm splicing a standard Class 1 splice, I do have a pretty long backberry, but Teufelberger out of the gate requests this longer backberry, but Samson does not, and nor do other Class 1 instructions. I just extend it because I like it a little bit better like that, because these eyes are so small, and the instructions that they give are usually for a larger eye. So I like there to be a lot more core berry past the throat than some of the instructions kind of explicitly ask for. But yeah, then once you get your cover marked and your core marked, then unlike other Class 1 splices, which this isn't Class 1 splices, the Teufelberger Splife, then we mark the core to be tapered. So we have our black marks on the core here, and when I talk about adapting a splice from one rope to another, when we look at the core of this rope, each group of strands is a group of 4 on the Tachyon. Each of these woven groups in here has 4 strands. Now, I think I'm remembering correctly that the XTC 24 and most other 24 strand ropes have groups of 2 strands. What the Tachyon calls for is that in each of these marked areas, I'm not removing the entire group. I'm only removing half of the group. So that means that the structure remains exactly the same. It's just diminished slightly. We're taking 4 groups and reducing them by half. So total, we're removing. One little tip that I would like to share that maybe you've seen me do before is that a lot of people tape covers and cores and stuff, especially new ropes, to keep them from unraveling. But I prefer to just use clothespins because tape leaves residue, and I don't use push fids to splice. I mean, the only thing I use my fid pusher for is to extract the cores of 24 strand ropes. Otherwise, I just use the fids for measuring, and I use this 1/4 inch fid for extracting stuff. I always use wire fids, and when you're using wire fids, you don't need these to be taped, and it's nice to keep that residue out of there, and it's quicker to remove and apply than tape. It is, I think, a lot easier than the standard like class 1 double braid splice, just because it doesn't take quite so much effort to like finish the parry. I was able to do this by hand. I didn't have to put it on like a 5-to-1 or anything, or use my saddle to like break these splices all the way in. I still think it's always a good idea to like load a splice with like 500-ish pounds before you like whip it, just to make sure everything's really secured and seated properly and you can inspect it really well. The only issue that I had with this splicing method is that when I followed everything to a T on the first splice here, I ended up with what I would consider a lot of cover slack. And for these short samples that I'm going to have break tested, that's pretty easy to remedy. You know, all you're going to do is milk it back from the eye, and you'll just get some extra cover back at the end of the rope where you cut it. But if you have like a long rope, like a 200-foot rope, then that slack is going to need to be milked all the way out. So what I did to remedy that, the only thing I did different with this second splice was that I made the eye a little bit bigger. I think their eye measurement was for like a 3-inch eye, so you can see that this first eye is very, very tight, whereas this second eye, I think I measured out like maybe like 3¼ inch for the eye, maybe even up to 4 inches, and that just allows you to overbury a little bit. So if you do end up with a lot of cover slack, it's a lot easier to kind of eliminate that. You can just overbury the eye to kind of work the slack in further. That way you're not going to have any milking issues, especially if you're, like when I splice my lanyards, sometimes it's nice to have an eye on both sides, and if you're consistently ending up with cover slack in your splices, then that's going to be a problem if you try to put eyes on both sides of a rope. So that's just something to practice and keep in mind. You should always be ending up with no extra cover slack when you're done with a splice. But anyways, we got these 2 nice samples in Tachyon here to send off and have break tested to see if I'm doing everything correctly. And I think, just for fun, we're going to do a splice battle on a sample of some of this Yale Prism. Really, really fun color combo. You like the rainbows there? What do you think about this? So instead of just doing what I would normally do and splicing an eye and then leaving 12 feet of rope for the to put on the bollard for the break test, I think instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a class 1 eye on one side and do an adapted Teufelberger Splife on the other side, and just do it in as short of a section as possible so it can be kind of a head-to-head against the 2 eyes. So yeah, should we splice up some Yale Prism? The only thing I'm going to have to do differently is I'm not going to adapt this splice for length. I mean, this rope is only 0.2 millimeters thicker than the Tachyon, so I'm going to use all the same length measurements. I'm going to use everything the same in the cover taper because they both have 24 strand covers. The only thing I'm going to do differently is that in the core, basically you're removing 50% of the strands the way that they taper the core. And so in the Yale core, since it's 2 strands per group, whereas the Tachyon was 4 strands per group, I only have to remove 1 strand every 3 until I eliminate half the strands from the core. But yeah, should we do that? What do you think about that?
Crowded places, feel it sinking in. Lonely faces, say you need a friend. No matter the distance, I will always be there. No more inhibition, I'll show you I care. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. Getting high, feeling low, and it's out of your control. You should know that I won't leave you. I'll stay beside you. I'm never letting you go. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. But I will guide you home. But I will guide you home. But I will guide you home. Fight your battles, always by yourself. In the shadows, hear you cry for help. No matter the distance, I will always be there. No more inhibitions, I'll show you I care. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. Getting high, feeling low, and it's out.
There we go. There's our Teufelberger style splife in Yale Prism. So we'll do a 5 fid lengths between the eyes and then do a class 1 splice on the other side, and we'll see if there's any discernible winner after we brake test it. Alright, we're packing up the samples to send them off to get brake tested. I have some webbing stuff that I need broken for a project that I'm doing, and then here's our head-to-head competitor. We got the Yale Prism with a standard class 1 splice, and then we have our Teufelberger Splife on the other end. I really like doing this splife, especially doing it in the Yale Prism. It just feels super nice. You have to get the tapers right, otherwise you get a weird kind of diameter inconsistency here where the crossovers are. But it's really nice, still pretty firm in the throat on this rope, but the eye is a lot less bulky, so a little bit easier to pass through cambium savers and stuff. But yeah, we'll get this broken and see if there's a clear winner on the strength for those eyes. And then we just have our Tachyon samples to just break and check it out. But yeah, that was a fun little thing to try. I've never done a diminished 24 strand splice like that. What do you think, Harry? You say bye? You say thanks for watching. Bye.
And it's out of your control. You should know that